Thank you for tuning in to The Arts in Business, a podcast that explores how artistic sensibilities can positively impact the business world. I am Sebastian Grube, an artist, entrepreneur, and communications professional who aims to build a more compassionate world through amplifying voices. I am also the founder of Beyond Comms, a communications agency that unearths and amplifies the stories that inspire founders to build sustainable and impactful businesses. So let's dive in. Hi listeners, thank you so much for joining today. I'm with Salvatore today. He's an amazing American traveler, one of the youngest people to have ever visited every country in the world, which is quite an accomplishment. He's also the head of FDI at Abu Dhabi Investment Office, where he leads company attraction, relationship management, and ecosystem enablement across 5 key sector cluster areas. That's a lot. We can maybe try to unpack that a little bit on this episode. He's also the president and founder of the culturally inclusive development NGO called Trail of Seeds. And I met Salvatore through a mutual friend a few months ago, and his open and welcoming energy is really just truly contagious and a pleasure to be around. And he also has a background in dance, which is really why we're here today. And I'm super excited to explore that and see how that relates to your activities and your engagements that you've had with people all over the world. So thank you so much for joining me today, Salvatore.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited because I don't know why or how necessarily dance connects to what I'm doing, but I'm excited to explore it over the next hour with you because both are very important to me, and so I'm sure there's lots of connections between them.
Yeah, and really that's what this podcast is about too, is to have exploratory conversations in which we can learn from each other. So I'm really excited to just ask questions and see where the conversation goes. So to start with, did you bring a beverage and a vessel of your choice?
I did. So I am a avid tea collector. So when you're traveling to every country, obviously you're not going to get a souvenir from every country because it would take up too much. But I would always spend, my last few dollars that I had, on exchange at the airport, getting tea or finding a tea cafe before I would go. And so I have in the cup. It is a Bulgarian mountain tea that I got from this really cute little tea shop in Sofia the day that I left. And then the cup itself is a Japanese tea cup. When I went to Japan in 2019 for my second time, I decided to just do all the best tea experiences. And so I went to Uji, where matcha is from. I went to some of these traditional Japanese tea experiences. I went to some more modern ones. And one of my friends, it was my birthday while I was there, and one of my friends got me this cup for my birthday. So I am drinking one of my favorite teas in one of my favorite teacups.
Thank you. Can you describe what's on the cup to the listeners who can't see it?
Yeah, it is pastel colored dragon. So it's gold and gold leaf embossed with beautiful pink and blue flowers, and then a dragon that has flowers, and I would think maybe her hair. I guess I shouldn't gender a inanimate mythical creature, but yeah, it's really nice.
Nice. I love
good
that
gift.
shimmer.
Yeah, it's the only one that I like. I definitely keep away from the cats because they knock everything else over. But this one I keep safe.
Yeah. And I love that we're kind of matching today. So I have a cup that is hand painted from Turkey. It's blue, gray, white, and has these little houses with red roofs on top, and kind of reminds me of it reminds me of maritime culture, or just gives me a maritime feeling, which is where I spent a lot of my childhood summers by the Baltic Sea. So it's kind of bringing me back to that. And inside I have a apple tea with some black tea because I needed a bit of caffeine.
Yeah. Delicious. Oh, I'm jealous. Yeah. We should try.
Yeah. And well, I'm jealous of the mountain tea. That sounds amazing. I'm gonna quote this because it was hard to find on your personal website. Right toward the end of your biography, you wrote, quote, "No matter where I am traveling, there are some things you'll always find me doing. I dance constantly, especially East African and Caribbean styles, though I've even trained in ballet." End of quote. I love that because it's so, wherever I look online and the kind of material that is online about you from your travels, which there's a lot, that line of dance doesn't show up so far except that bio. And I want to know more about that. Tell me more about the dance, your dance background.
I really started, I guess, when I went to boarding school, and it wasn't very formal at the beginning. So I went to this international boarding school called United World College. There's students from 90 different countries, and to this day, I've never been to a party that is better than a UWC party. And that's because, like we would kind of give each continent, like time to DJ. And so we would
Mhm.
have like, dance hall music from Jamaica, and then we'd have like European house, and then we'd have like American hip hop, and then we'd have like, all these different styles at all of these um, these parties. And so I kind of was just came in as like a chameleon, really interested in in dancing and in all of the different styles that I could. And the one that like really stuck was Caribbean soca. So one of my best friends was from Trinidad, and she was an incredible dancer. And kind of funnily, I once had there was this group of girls, a, a Kenyan, a Trinidadian, and a Zambian, and they kind of made the joke that I would always stay a virgin if I didn't learn how to dance. And so, and I don't know if I've ever said that publicly before, but that is true. I remember specifically where in campus we were when they said that. And I think that was like, okay, wait, I need to like learn how to dance. And so I learned Caribbean soca, and we would just at parties, right? And it would be like the way it worked then was every time a new song would come out, like everybody would meet in a room and just like try and figure out how to dance to that. And they would teach me the different dance styles at the time, like doing like TikToking and all of these things.
Mm.
And I got just really into it, uh, and got really excited. I visited Trinidad a couple years later. Her mother every year would send me like a list of all of the Caribbean, of all the carnival songs, and as I started traveling, I would just dance everywhere I would travel and just try and like adapt the different styles. And then in 2011, I went for my first time to Tanzania, and there was a dance troupe there that we were working with through the Trail of Seeds NGO. And I decided to kind of just to join that troupe. And then this was kind of like in a way a dance intensive. We spent 6 or 7 weeks every single day dancing for 3 to 5 hours. Getting really deep into to East African line dancing. And then I return every year, and we still do a lot of dancing. But those first few years was when we would do like practice and rehearsals every single day, and we would do shows. Now it's a little bit more. Like ad hoc. And then when I was about 25, I decided um, to take some time off of work, and I was traveling, and I realized that with both the styles that I had been trained in with soca and the East African dance, it was really about uh, like your hips. It was like
Mm.
especially like in soca, oftentimes you like leave your feet on the ground and you just whine your hips, right?
Mm.
And so I said, you know what? Let me try and like learn ballet. Like I should learn how to move my feet. And I think it's the most like beautiful form of dance, and so artistic. And so I took um, this like really like crazy like one-on-one ballet intensive um, for a few months, again every single day, just kind of like getting back into it. Um, and and yeah, and as I've like traveled, I mean, I think I have um, really danced in every country, and it was a big part of um, of my travel experience. And I do remember one time I was in an interview. It was like a business interview, um, and the interviewer asked me, okay, that's incredible. You've been to every country. What have you learned? And I said, everybody dances. And he kind of laughed. He said, I was expecting some kind of economics insight, but instead I said dancing. So yeah, that's a little bit of that's most of the story, but it was a little bit kind of ad hoc, but like formalized in a few different ways, and just exploring and just seeing different ways to like move your body and realizing that everybody does it.
The person on the interview that you were referring to, they asked you, what did you learn? Um, I want to ask you the same question, but I want to ask you, what did you learn about yourself through dance?
I think dance is the most basic form or expression of human happiness. And I think I learned how to be happy with dance. Like I think it was um like it's always kind of been uh my like go-to like fun escape. And I I can kind of like measure or like take the barometer of my happiness on my like willingness and um my like how often I'm dancing, because I just feel so happy. And I remember another time, and these are all actually, like a disclaimer, a lot of these stories are like old, and this kind of makes me sad because I haven't really done a lot of dance in the last like 5 years, maybe. But
Mm.
I remember there was one point in 2013, I had two of my colleagues over to my house, and I had this big dancing mirror. I have one now in my house. I in um, every home I always put up a dancing mirror because I find it really important. And people always think it's not a dancing mirror. They think it must be a mirror for something else. And it very honestly is a dancing mirror. And so I had told them I dance and it's really important to me. And so they said, like, let's see it. So I played a couple soca songs and I just went kind of like all out. And this guy who was like this very stern, kind of like rigid, like to use that word again, Kuwaiti guy, he like pulled me aside and he's like, "You looked so happy when you were dancing,
Mm.
and I wish that you looked that happy every day of your life." And I thought that was such a nice thing to say. Um, but also in a way, also sad to be like, okay, how can you bring that joy uh, into other parts of life?
Yeah, that really resonates with me because the first, I would say the first art form that I engaged with out of the many that I have was dance. And I did dance for I think like 16, 17 years until I kind of gave it up or it just dwindled away. But now every time I dance again, that feeling of happiness comes back, and I'd say to myself, why am I not doing this more often? Like this makes me so happy, this makes me feel good, and I keep forgetting it, but then I'm reminded when I do it. I love that learning, like dance is the most basic form of human happiness. It totally rings true. So true.
There's and you see it in every, even like I've been to very, very conservative Christian um like worship sessions where they would say it's kind of like in the movie Footloose, like dancing is not allowed, but they're bobbing their heads. I mean, everyone has kind of a rhythm, like
Yeah.
there's I've been to, I've been in weddings in Africa, in Arabia, in Europe, I mean, there's always dance, and I find it like really, really fascinating. And people just get so excited about it. I mean, I have this one video I'll send to you of me dancing at a wedding in Algeria, and
Oh yeah.
I mean, the people like the screaming and like it just everyone gets so excited when a guest does that, especially often when you're traveling, you don't speak the same language, and so dancing is like the easiest way to communicate. Um, and then also like when you're young, I think why people dance a lot is like we don't have all the tools of communication, and like where maybe like you're interested in somebody or trying to become friends with somebody or whatever, and then like dancing really, really brings you close really fast. And I
Yeah.
think as we get like older and there's less dancing, or we put up like walls to it, um, it becomes uh, like we lose that ability to connect beyond words and beyond like really any kind of beyond anything. I mean, I find dance to be an incredibly connecting
Yeah.
activity.
Yeah, it is. I mean, you have to, like, this is why I now also being older have a harder time getting into it because there's a certain lack of in what is the right word, inhibition. You have to be somewhat inhibited or um free. You have to free yourself to a certain extent in order to connect with other people, and not free yourself mentally but free yourself physically and through movement. And as I'm speaking, like I'm moving my hand and I'm realizing that I'm moving a lot more because I'm suddenly conscious about um my body and how I connect to the world around me. I think that's a powerful thing about dance. Like what you were saying, even in like the most conservative Christian areas or rituals, people are still bobbing their head or they're tapping their foot, and arguably that could be considered dance as well to a smaller and certain extent. So yeah, I think it really is all around us, and you can connect to people so much more easily if you free yourself, if you let yourself be free.
And that's also part of it too. I found is encouraging people to dance. Like I feel like it's the job of a dancer and not a technical dancer, because I've always also said like you can't be a bad dancer. You can be bad at salsa, you can be bad at soca, you can be bad at ballet, but you can't be a bad dancer, because dancing is just like is expressing yourself, right? And so
Yeah.
a lot of people are afraid to dance because they think, oh, they can only do it in one style, or how are they going to look or whatever. But I always just tell, like, go dance. Like, it's always more fun to dance alone. But I often think that there's sometimes a responsibility of a dancer, like at a party, to like encourage other people to do it and to be the one being a little bit silly and to get the party going. And that's something I have like I used to do a lot. I'd be like, I would love to walk into a bar or something and see that nobody was dancing, and then be like, all right, like let's get everybody dancing, and then go to the dance floor and just be the only ones. And I think it comes from uh like this, like maybe a youthful naivete around like uh identity, almost, of being like nobody knows who I am and it doesn't matter. And as you get older, you like create this identity around yourself, and it's harder to be free from that. But
Mm.
I have a lot of memories of just like dancing alone, but also encouraging other people to dance and like starting parties. And I've found it to like it all comes back to this joy. And like the more I think about it now, it's like sad that like I'm not like it's not a big part of like um uh my life anymore. So maybe I need to add it back in somehow.
Yeah, yeah. I think those are always good moments of realizations when I spend some time away from some type of art form, and then I talk about it and I realize, you know what? I need that. I need that back in my life. Um, so so we talked a little bit about what you learned about yourself from dancing. I want to shift it to kind of the central question of this podcast, which is defining artistic sensibilities. Um, so what does that phrase or those two words mean to you, artistic sensibilities?
So I think of it in two ways. Um and maybe stepping a little bit away from dance, one of the ways that I talk about art, because I also do a lot of art collecting, is, and I think I maybe have told you this before, is that I think art needs to be a a mirror so you learn about yourself, a window so you learn about the world, and a TV so that you can always come back to it. And I think that artistic sensibility is kind of similar. I think that it's about being aware of yourself and how you express yourself, and then being aware of the world and being aware of others and how you can connect those expressions. So it's kind of like, dance. It goes back to the conversation we just had, dancing alone and dancing with others. Is like dancing alone is about understanding yourself and and how you want to express your emotions. I mean, we talked about dance giving joy, but you can also, I've danced a lot when I was like really sad and like listening to sad music and just like seeing how my body reacts to that. Um, and but then it's also about how do you communicate that feeling to others, right? And how can, either if you're dancing with them or if you're dancing for them, to to whatever the goal is. If you want to express joy, if you want to express fear, whatever it is, like uh, how can you dance in a way that elicits that feeling from yourself, but also communicates that to others? And it's the same way that I say, you know, good art says something. It's about an idea or an emotion, but great art like spreads that idea and spreads that emotion. And I think that's how I would really look at the idea of artistic sensibilities. Any kind of medium that enables that self reflection as well as that human connection.
Mm, I love that. Yeah, and I when we spoke, before I did tell you how much I love that idea of the mirror, the window, the TV, and looking at it through that framework. So thank you for bringing that up in this context, and really this idea of learn from yourself, connect to others. I think that's so powerful. So you you have a very, from the outside looking, very dry job, investment head of FDI finances. Um, I'm sure it's a lot more exciting. I know it is a lot more exciting. But how does your, I'm gonna call it artistic practice or dance practice, or the sensibilities that you've gotten from just dancing, um, how do they connect? Where do they connect? Um, where do they show up in that part of your world and your reality?
I think it's a lot about that human connection. So not to say that they connect because of connection, but I think that going back to like that definition of artistic sensibility is learning about yourself and learning about others. And that dance helps me learn about myself and learn about others. And I think also travel, you know, is again, you travel both for yourself and for others. And so I feel like in the work that I do, because I have honed this skill set of empathy for others, but then also in reflection for myself, it enables me to find the right way to communicate with investors who would be looking to expand and to really try and understand them more. To see them as not just like numbers on a piece of paper and the amount of money that they're bringing in, but see them as human and find the ways to connect and to be really um, making sure that I bring empathy into all that I do, and that goes a long way. Like I think a lot more than people would think, right? That um, uh, you think that these deals, these investment deals, get done on purely a numbers basis, right? Like what is the return doesn't make
Mm,
sense, but actually there's a big relationship around that. There's needs, there's like wants, there's having like negotiation is not about fighting for what you want, but it's a dance almost. It's a finding the common ground and trying to understand what they want and what they can sacrifice and what you want and what you can sacrifice. And so ultimately it comes down to artistic sensibility is about connecting with yourself and with others, and that is incredibly useful, I think, in almost all lines of work, but especially in investing when you're making important decisions, um, like that have real impact on a lot of lives. And if you don't include empathy in that, I think uh, you're going to be less successful.
yeah. And maybe before I ask you a question that dives into that a little bit deeper, um, tell our listeners what you do, maybe in 5 sentences if you can, just so they have an idea.
Yeah, so I lead FDI attraction for the Abu Dhabi Investment Office. So it's a government entity that attracts business into the Emirate, and we give financial incentives to companies that are expanding here. So we help companies to land in Abu Dhabi by giving them money that will kind of push their business plans forward, and by also giving kind of like non-financial ecosystem support. So I lead the department that does the company attraction, so finding the companies and the relationship management. So once we sign with them, the making sure that they're successful, and then the ecosystem enablement, so making sure that all of the government entities within Abu Dhabi are supporting these projects.
Right. It's a very important job. Um, and I like that because it connects different cultures. It connects to your travel as well. Um, how, yeah. So let's dive a little bit deeper. And I love that you brought empathy into the conversation as well. I think that's such a powerful skill, if you want to call it a skill or just sensibility too. How do you make sure that you bring that empathy into your professional life?
Yeah, so I think that there's a few ways to look at it. I mean, one is to like your team, like to your colleagues, also to your leadership, and then of course um, uh, to I guess your clients. And so I think the biggest part where it comes through from me is in my team and like as a manager. Um, I've always said that the easiest way would be to just say, "This is my management style. Everybody adapt to me." But to bring in empathy and say, okay, how can I be the best manager for each person individually takes a lot more effort, and sometimes can decrease the productivity in a way. But I think that's a short term, uh, like a short term effect. And in the long term, if you're able to lead each person in a way that enables them to not only achieve what they want to achieve, but achieve more, then you have so much more success and you're so much more productive, even though it takes a lot more like time commitment at the beginning. And so in building teams, empathy is incredibly important. And it's not important in a like an altruistic way. I think it's important for desired outcomes as well. Like it's you will do more, you will make more money for the business, you will, you know, you'll be more successful if you're empathetic. Um, I think then working with your clients, it's about, you know, how can you, that's where empathy gets a little bit harder because you might not have the same um, goal, or at least there might be some, you know, opposing views on who gets the most out of something. And so having that empathy to really understand, okay, like where are you coming from? What is your need? Um, like what is an absolute? What is something that you're able to sacrifice a little bit? Like having that empathy gives you an understanding that is enables you to get the most out of a negotiation, um, as long as you don't like let that be taken advantage of. Because I think also sometimes empathy can lead to like too much disclosure, right? I mean, I think it's you don't want in a negotiation, you don't want to disclose your all of your position, but you do want to disclose enough so that they understand where you're coming from. And so I think in with clients, it's always important to like understand them not just as again like a number on a paper, but as people. And then same with leadership, right? I mean, it's just trying to like being empathetic to, okay, you're in a different position than I am, which has different kinds um, of expectations and requirements, and so you might look at a problem through different lenses. And that's really what it all comes down to in all of these situations is looking at any experience or anything that's happening and saying, okay, all of the people that are involved in this, all the different stakeholders have a different perspective on this. And empathy is just about trying to understand all of those different perspectives and saying, okay, what actually works the best for everybody and not just for myself.
Yeah. And what I'm hearing out of that too is this going back to dance and the kind of pure connection that you can have with other people without words. I wonder if um, some of that is coming into your work specifically because you have such a great understanding of these different audience groups or stakeholders, to use more of a business term. And I do feel like you, in order to understand their needs, sometimes or often it's not about the words that they're saying or the questions that you're asking and how they're responding, but it's really being able to build more of a deeper connection with them, um, that allows you to understand really where they're going and what they mean with their words. I don't know if that, um, if I'm going in a direction there that seems true for you, but I just wanted to reflect that back to you.
Yeah, I think it's not something that is active, right? Like it's
Mm,
not like if you see me in the office, I'm gonna be saying, okay, like, you know, uh, let's think about how everybody feels about this or something. I think it's a little bit more intuitive, and I think that that's also something interesting about dance. Like when people talk about, you know, again, I was saying, you know, with dance, you don't need to communicate. So it's what is the intuition? You know, like you could say, oh, like let's say you like dance with, you know, somebody at a club all night, you might assume like, oh, like that, like we're friends or like maybe more than friends or whatever. Like you get a vibe from somebody, even if all you did was dance. I think in it's the same in uh like in business, right? Like you might not be, it's not black and white. I think there's some like intuition involved. It's not like you everything you learn about them is something that they say to you. There's so much context of like, you know, where somebody is from, you know, like how old they are, all these different things that kind of give you a sense of who the person is, and And so yeah, I do think it plays an incredibly important part, but it's not as like active as it might seem from like listening to the way I was just speaking about it.
Yeah, no, but I think calling attention to that is really part of this podcast as well, is to say, what are these things that we might be doing subconsciously or that are just informing the way that we're existing in the world? Because I think, especially with the arts, it's so hard to articulate the impact that the arts can have, or that an artistic practice can have on how you live your life, or how you're affecting other people. So I think I'm a big believer in reflecting and in doing exactly that. What you were saying about through art, this mirror and understanding yourself a little bit better. And I think that by maybe drawing some points of connections that might exist and exploring those, we can make it easier for people too to be proud of bringing the practice that they might be doing at home, whether that's sketching or drawing or photography, into their business, into their professional lives, and to say, no, I'm doing this and this is how this is actually informing my work, or that's why I'm so good at negotiating or at figuring out what the other party needs or wants. So I appreciate you going down this road and journey with me. Um, Something else. Oh yeah, what you were saying, it reminded me of, I've been watching these Instagram reels and TikToks of dancers who improvise. And I think it's so clear, this kind of the connection that you need to have with the other person, this give and take, and almost feeling the other person without the words, knowing when they move their hand up or down, your body responds in different ways. I just wanted to mention that kind of, when you were talking, that's what I was thinking about. It's sometimes not necessarily visible, but that connection is there, whether you want it or not.
That reminds me of like something I've always struggled with is like really misogynistic male-led dancing.
Mm,
So I remember I took some salsa classes. Actually, no, maybe it was merengue, whatever. I took some Latin dance, and it was basically like, okay, the men you do X, Y, Z, and the women you just do whatever the man says. And that's like exactly what the teacher said. And I know that's like incredibly oversimplifying it, but like just him saying that really like put me off in a way, because soca is really female led in a way. Like there's this term
mm,
test your wine, where basically like a woman will come in front of you and she will whine her hips. And the idea is like, can you follow her? Right. Like, so it's like
mm,
the woman is leading and the man is following. Um, and, uh, and similar, I guess, in like the East African line dance, it's really, like separate. I mean, there's usually a line of women and a line of men. Um, and if there is interaction, it's not really led by one or the other necessarily. It depends kind of on what's going on. And I guess also in ballet, really, it's, you know, a lot more like mutual. Um, you know, like the different genders have different roles, but um, I find it, uh, uh, you know, you see a lot of culture in dance too, like the
mm,
ugly and the beautiful. um and that's one thing I've always like thought about a little bit when I've been like learning these other styles. Was kind of like, oh, like why does this have to play a role in it? And also it's also the similar conversation that people always think dance, um especially the kinds of dance that I've done, are way more sexual than they actually are, you know, like that.
mm,
And it's actually similar to what I said before, like the difference between dancing for or with somebody. And there's like you know, uh, in any time where there is like human connections, there's going to be people like putting power dynamics into that connection, and there's going to be people taking advantage of that connection. Um, and you see that in dance, and then of course you see that even more in like in the business world, right? Like, yes, empathy like leads to productivity for the for everybody involved, but um, you know, maybe more detrimental power dynamics will lead to a benefit of one person, and that might be what ends up winning. Um, and that's kind of like an interesting like connection to make between how you see that play out in dance and how you see that play out in like in like a negotiation table, because
Yeah.
it's it can be that can be like it can all be taken advantage of. Like any if you're trying to be empathetic, you're opening yourself up to that risk as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And maybe, well, I'm an idealist in that sense, so I would argue, I will always argue for empathy and transparency or openness or honesty to a certain extent.
A dance story that kind of connects with business that I used to always do is I went through a phase of really hating the question, what do you do? And
Mm.
it was more because I just didn't want to talk about work, and also I was thinking a lot about value and like what does the question what do you do mean? Like you could optimistically or idealistically say, oh, they're just trying to find a way to connect and get to know you. But I think often the what do you do actually is more of like how should I value you? And maybe
Mm.
that's like cynical, but there was a long time where I would always answer it with I dance. And
Mm.
there's this one time in particular, I was on a flight from the States to Abu Dhabi, and uh, there was a woman sitting next to me, and she asked, "What do you do?" And I said, "I dance." And then we had this great conversation about dance for the next however many hours. And before we were about to land, I said, "Oh, I have to go to Saudi Arabia tomorrow for work, and I just feel like so tired. Like I don't want to go." And she looked at me. She goes, "Oh, I didn't realize that they dance in Saudi Arabia." And this was in 2013 or 2014. So this was, now there's a lot more dancing than there was, but maybe at the time she was correct. And I said, "Oh no, I'm a consult. I'm a business consultant. I'm not going for dance." And she looked at me like I had like lied to her. And she was like, "You said you dance." And I was like, "I do dance. Like we talked about this clear." And I just thought that was so funny that like that she kind of felt misled by being like, what do you do? But I think it's um I would like to encourage more people to, when someone says what do you do, to say, okay, actually let me tell you where I get joy from, because that's what I value, right?
Yeah.
Rather than let me tell you what like how society values me, or like what brings me money, or monetary value. And I think then we would have so much more interesting conversations if we would just if we would focus on uh like what brings you joy, or like what's exciting you right now in the world, rather than what do you do for work.
Yeah. Yeah. I think expanding that question into what do you do that brings you joy? Because the all of the people that I talk to from the outside, they have a job and that's what they do. But then once you go deeper and you get to know them, they all have like these multifaceted identities that it's hard to talk about. I mean, often it's hard to talk about with your family too, for them to understand exactly what you do, because you might be doing 5 different things that bring you joy, and it might look like they're not connected at all, but the underlying kind of thread or point of connection is that idea of joy and happiness. And as long as the things that you do bring you that, why not do them? Doesn't matter how other people see it or perceive it. I love
And
that
there's also,
story.
I think there's also a difference between like what you do and what brings you joy, and also like what you're good at. um and and I sometimes worry, like, even like I don't think I was ever very like a phenomenal dancer. Like I think I was always like good. I also think because of the styles I did, I was also kind of always a novelty. Like I was the white guy doing East Africa line dancing. Like my solos would get really loud applauses. I think because of not because of the dancing, but more of like me doing the dancing. Um,
Yeah.
and there was a long time where I like struggled with like, oh, like I guess I can't say I'm a dancer because I'm not the best,
Mm.
or like when can you say that you're a dancer, like when can you say that you dance or whatever. And then I think I at some point I kind of like stopped worrying about it a little bit. But um even like before coming on this, I was like, um how like who am I to talk about dance? And then like as we're talking, I'm like, you know what, like that actually was a really foundational like part of my experience, and really connects to a lot of what I do. And so and so yeah, I'm definitely a dancer, and I can talk about dance.
Yes, I love it. Thank you. And thank you for sharing that, because I think that it's so calling yourself a type of artist, like a dancer, or I'm a singer, or I'm a director, that can seem so scary, but we don't need to do that. We don't need to be a dancer to have artistic sensibilities. We don't need to be a singer to know how to sing or to know how to listen carefully. I think even if you just do it as a hobby or as something that brings you joy and you don't do it professionally, there is value in that. So I'm really grateful that you're bringing that value onto this podcast and to our listeners as well. And maybe going down that route of value creation or whatever you want to call it, from your reflections, how do you think people with an arts background who maybe finished university but they've been studying the arts, or those who are artists and want to move to a different career, in what ways can they leverage their sensibilities to engage with corporations or businesses?
I think it's a lot about that, going back to the theme of like empathy and connection, but
Mm,
it's a lot about, okay, how you know, you don't create art in a vacuum, right? Like you don't create invisible art. There it art is an expression of a feeling or an idea or something, right? And so there, it's not just, even the most basic art, if it's just meant to be pretty, is still that's a human sensibility and desire, right?
mm,
And so there is still that idea of like connecting with yourself and connecting with others. And so I think in a way it's about, okay, how can you take that, what you've learned in that expression or in those expressions artistically, and kind of use that to make sure that you're still expressing in the relationships that you have to have in business, or in the the content that you're producing in business. I mean, um, the Orange Man called his book "The Art of the Deal" for a reason, right? I mean, like
yeah,
uh, it is an art to it. I mean, there is those kind of like sensibilities around
yeah,
corporate life. And maybe there needs to be more of it. Like there needs to be a little bit more thinking of not just doing something in a binary 0 and 1 way, but thinking, okay, uh, how can this be structured? How can I get, like, what do I want to get out of it? How am I getting that out? Like, is it sparking joy, or is it just giving me a return? And is that return enough joy, or do I need something more? So, I think, to conclude that ramble a little bit, I think it's about, um, through art forms, you learn to reflect on yourself and reflect on others, and I think that in the business world, being really sure of yourself and confident through that reflection will enable your success.
mm, I love that. I'm letting that sink in a little bit. Being confident about yourself and knowing yourself enables success, because it kind of brings you down to a value driven person to a certain extent. If you know your values, if you know who you are, it is easier for you to say no to the wrong things and yes to the right things, and make use of the opportunities that might come your way. Um, is what I'm that just comes to my mind to kind of reflect that learning that you just gave me. Um, in your capacity as a head of a department and working for an investment office, how can you or the organization encourage the use of artistic sensibilities in that part of the world, or
I think a
part of
large
people's
part for
lives?
Yeah, for
Yeah.
me, it comes in like the relationship management and then the team management. So it's, really leaving space in the day for that kind of reflection. In corporate world, we call it a lot feedback, right? So, um, how do we get feedback and like reflect on, okay, like what am I doing well? What do I enjoy? Like what do I want the future to look like? What can I learn from what I did today? And I think maybe the deliverable or the outcome in the corporate world might be like a chart, or like an Excel sheet or a PowerPoint thing. But at the end of the day, it's still kind of like reflecting an idea, um, or a or or an emotion. similar to
Yeah.
how a painting, is trying to communicate that idea. So, um, if you think about, okay, how do you look at a PowerPoint slide versus how do you look at a painting? You're actually asking a lot of the same questions, like, okay, how does this make me feel by just looking at it quickly? Like what's the aesthetic of it? You want your deliverables to look nice, because it's pleasing to the eye and makes somebody dive deeper into it. Then you're saying, okay, like, what is it? What is it trying to say? So is it communicating something like clearly? Like, are you getting something from it? And then kind of, okay, well, how do how do I feel about that, right? Um,
Yeah.
and in art, it might be like, oh, like, okay, how does that make me feel? Like the reflection of the thought, but on in a PowerPoint delivery, maybe it's okay, like, what do I do next with this? And so, uh, I don't know how deep I can make that analogy go. I've only just thought about it, but I do think it's an appropriate one to be like, okay, like, how do we consume art, and how much of a parallel is that to how we consume um, work? And I think it is quite, maybe not identical, but I think there's a lot to that. And so making sure that everything that we're doing is communicating something clearly, is like driving action, um, works. And so in team management, making sure that all of the team is able to express themselves well, and that nobody's like views are not being included. And then I think in relationship management, working with others, it's a lot about, okay, like, how do we understand one another, and I think a lot of that understanding and human connection comes from those artistic sensibilities.
Yeah. Yeah. And sadly, we're coming up on time. So to start to draw this episode to a close, I want to go back to something that you said at the very beginning, which was you realizing that you um, haven't really been dancing for a while. So what are you going to do to start dancing again?
I like that question. I mean, luckily I have that dancing mirror, so maybe it's just about putting on some good music and just like forgetting that about everything else, and like just like dancing for a minute. Maybe it's um, maybe it starts there. Like dancing a little bit alone, and then um, uh, I'm having a party this weekend. Maybe I should like clear out the tables and make a more active dance space. We'll see.
Yeah.
Uh, and But yeah, I don't know why I've stopped. I mean, uh, I think sometimes we also like need to like let ourselves be happy. Like it's okay to be joyful.
Yeah.
I think we're so boxed in by like what emotions we feel like we can or can't have based on who we are, where we are, or what we're doing. But maybe like maybe just have joy. Actually, like yesterday, this like funny thing happened to me that I uh, have actually been like it weirdly been thinking about the whole day, which is that I was at the gym and like my trainer was like we were taking turns. Like he would do an exercise, I would do one in between. Sometimes like when the other person was doing it, like we might do like a side thing, like a small exercise on the side.
Mm.
And at one point when he was doing um, one exercise, I was like standing and kind of just like pulling a little bit on the rope or something. And he looked at me, he's like, "What? Like, what are you doing? Like, what muscle are you? Like, what is that?" And I and I was like, "Oh no, I'm just playing." And it was like this like really kind of like vulnerable moment in a way where I was like just doing something ridiculous in the gym, and he was like, "What is that?" And I was like, "No, I'm just playing. Like, I'm not focused on making any muscle bigger. I'm just like having fun and I'm playing." And then today at work, I had a gaming company come and present to me, like a mobile gaming
Mm.
esports company, and they in their pitch they were talking about like making play more, um, more for like out in our culture, um, and I remember in university we studied the theory of play with like Heitzinga, who's a kind of like a philosopher on play, and I like mentioned that to the company, and they were aware of him, and we had this interesting discussion around play. All started because of this funny comment at the gym where I was just like playing with like an extension band or something, and so maybe the next step is just like letting myself like have joy and like playing a little bit, and not worrying if somebody at the gym is like, that's not building a muscle, and I can be like, no, but it's fun. Like that's all that
Yeah.
matters.
Yeah, thank you for sharing me that story. It reminds me, I was dancing in the gym yesterday when, like, in between I was working out. They play this like what techno rap type music in the gym where I'm at, and it just made me like move my hips a little bit and like my hands and arms. I didn't really care about how I looked because I just wanted to have fun, and I was vibing with the music. So yes, like dance, go take charge of your emotions, and if you feel down and you want to dance, or just dance to have joy.
Exactly.
Yeah,
I mean, sure.
yeah. So last question for this episode: what are your next big milestones, and what intentions are you setting for them?
That is a really great question. I think I have always known like what would make a good day, like what I would feel successful with. Like I know I like to dance, to exercise, to pray, to read, to like talk to family. Um, and yet a lot of times I find myself at the end of the day not having done many of those. And so I think it's the milestone is really I just want to like get back to me, and really think through like everything I do um in my day. Is there a reason for it? Does it link back to one of those things that like brings me happiness and brings me joy? And if it doesn't, then I don't need to be doing it. And so that's what I'm going to try and do in like I'm starting now, but like really hardcore, New Year's resolution 2023. I just want um to make sure that I don't forget what brings me joy, because it's not that we do activities that bore us for no reason. It's because I think sometimes we just forget like that this makes me happy. And I think this podcast was a really good conversation actually to be like, I should dance more often. I like dancing, and I'm good at it. And so why not do it more?
That makes me happy. Yay. Um, awesome. Where can people learn more about you if they're curious?
So I'm not super posty lately, but on Instagram at Sal Lavallo. Also have quite a few travel videos on YouTube, also Sal Lavallo, and then increasingly on the business side, LinkedIn also, there for Salvatore Lavallo. So all pretty straightforward. Only one in the world with my name, so easy to find.
Great. And I'll put those links in the show notes as well. Thank you so much for coming on this episode. It was amazing to talk to you, and thank you for diving in with me and learning and exploring together. I really appreciate it. Thank you, Salvatore. Thank you for listening to today's episode of The Arts in Business. Episodes are being released weekly, so make sure to follow or subscribe. I hope you have a great week ahead of you.